What is up, guys? Winter Kills here, and welcome to a brand new What Would video, where we're going to be talking about a card and whether or not it can or cannot come back on a future ban list. We've talked about the Dragon Rulers in the past. We've talked about Deep Sea Diva and Spellbook of Judgment and Yugioh and all of these incredible cards and whether or not they can or cannot come back. I've got a few talking points listed here on my one monitor of things, reasons why it could and why it couldn't. And I try to have that standard for each card we talk about. And I think it's important to have sort of both sides of the story. That way, not only me, but you guys can sort of weigh in based off of the, ideas I've given, some of the reasonings behind as to why a certain card can or cannot come back. That way we have sort of both sides of the story. I don't want to come in too biased saying it, this card can come back or no, it can't come back. This is here simply for discussion purposes. So the card we're going to be talking about today, if you haven't already seen the title, is of course the infamous Maxx C. Card that was at 3 for a long time, then went down to 2, then went down to 1, where I feel like it was almost more so of a problem than when it was at 3, because at 1 it was just sort of a sacky one of that. If you saw it, it was pretty much game over, given the circumstance, right? Given the right moment, if you had the Maxx C for the right combo, for that zoo combo or whatever. I don't know if even those two cards were, I don't know if Maxx C was still legal at that point. It might have been. But either way, that's just an example. Now, before we go any further, I want to talk about why Maxx C became so infamous in the first place. Now, back a couple years ago when this card was at 3, it started, finding its way into certain main decks, in and out, kind of more of a format-dependent card before we had all these other hand traps like Ghost Bell, Ghost Ogre, Ash Blossom, Ghost Cherries, and soon Null Nun and Blooming Dogwood. We didn't really have a lot of hand traps. The only hand traps we really had was Droll and Lockbird, DD Crow, Effect Valor, and Maxx C. They were all sort of situational in their own right, but eventually it got to the point where the format was just getting to the point where we had more and more faster paced decks, and Maxx C just found its way into every main deck as a 3-of staple. And it sort of got to the point where a lot of people felt as though it put so many decks in a weird position where that if you were under Maxx C, you did one of two things. You either passed and give them as little draws as possible and then lose next turn because of that, because your board was so lackluster, or hope that the cards they drew weren't good enough to kill you. You kind of had to hope on that 50-50 chance. Either you pass and lose, or you pass and hope to God they didn't have the cards that they needed to be able to finish you off that final turn. Or the other option is, play through a Maxx C, take the Maxx C challenge, as it were called, and go through your full combo and give your opponent as many cards as you could through that combo. For every special summon, they draw a card, right? And hope that your board was going to be enough to make it so even with the amount of cards they drew, it could be 5+ cards, that they still wouldn't be able to break your board and that you'd be able to win. Now, there were some decks that this probably could apply to, some FTK decks, or some decks like Synchro Fusionists back in the day that could take the Maxx C challenge and literally deck your opponent out because of the special summoning capability. But we don't have cards like, mainly one to name one of those cards that was capable of doing that was Level Eater. That card could deck out an opponent pretty fast in a deck like Synchro Fusionist. So that is just sort of a brief overview of Maxx C. And eventually, like I said, it got hit down to 2 and then 1, where it was probably at its worst point. Again, it was like one of those really sacky cards. If your opponent saw the 1-of, they were probably going to win the game because of all those reasons I had mentioned prior. So with that being said, it's 2019 now. A few years have passed with Maxx C being at 0, and we're going to be talking about some reasons I have for why it could come back, why it can't come back, and then ultimately at the end I'll give my opinion, personally what I think if it could or couldn't come back, and then some reasons as to why. So we'll get started with why it could come back. We'll play devil's advocate, if you will, for somebody who might think, no, it can't come back. So basically, some of the reasons why I think it could come back is it was lower the potency of some of the combo decks in the game, like Guard Dragon, Thunder Dragon, any deck involving danger, and would overall just lower the odds of people wanting to play build-a-board decks. A lot of people don't like this format right now, at least the past few formats, because of how it's basically been, in some cases, your opponent solitaires, and you lose at the end of it. Maxx C coming back would deter a lot of those decks from being even played in the first place. The potency of them would be knocked down quite a bit because Maxx C would just be a card that exists in the game. Something you have to worry about. Do I want to go for the full combo here? Do they have Maxx C? If they do have Maxx C and I get hit mid combo with it, what's my plan at that point? Etc, etc. So that's one reason why I think it could come back. It would lower the potency and the power of some of those really powerful spam decks that we see, and it would just nerf danger inherently, I feel, because Drone Lock already does a good job at that, but Maxx C could help out so much more to slow the danger archetype as a whole down, and into future formats as well. So I think that is a good answer to it. Other than just going to the ban list and saying let's just start banning cards, Maxx C could be a good counter for it. Now, another reason I have for it to come back is that we have cards to counter it, and we have way easier access to them as opposed to what we had in the past. In past formats, one of the main outs to stopping a Maxx C was a card like Solemn Strike. But of course, that requires that card to be set. A few turns have to have had passed, or some things like that to have taken place. And you'd have to have the Solemn Strike for that well-timed Maxx C. But nowadays, we have cards like Call by the Grave, and not only do we have Call by the Grave, we have Ash Blossom, which can completely negate the Maxx C if it goes through, if it tries to go through. So we have two counters that are both at 3 right now and very accessible to the player base as a whole. Ash Blossom being a common now, and of course Call by the Grave has been like a $2 common for quite some time. So we do have tons, not tons, but a good amount of counters to Maxx C that exist in the game already that can make this card not as impactful if it were to come back, because it would have to deal with those counters that it had never had to deal with in past formats when it was previously legal. A third talking point I have for this card's coming back is the fact that the OCG has Maxx C legal at 3 right now. Shout out to my Discord for letting me know what it was at 3, because I couldn't find an OCG ban list in the time that I was doing some research. And yeah, they've had this card at 3 for a little while now, and it hasn't proven to be a problem. We always know the OCG likes to experiment with things that we view as crazy on their ban list. Recently, Solemn Warning had just come back to 3, and they brought like Danglong back as well. But they have Maxx C and Vanity's Emptiness legal over there, so I think if they could have it at 3, we could probably bring this card back to 2 or 3. I think bringing it back to 1 gets into that dangerous territory where it's like, you know, it's a Saki one of, do they have it, do they not have it, sort of thing, and I don't think that's good. I think Maxx C is a 3 or none card, maybe 2 in some situations, but I don't think 1 would be the way to do it. But of course, I think if they were to bring it back, they would probably go right to 2 or to 3. I just hope they wouldn't do it to 1. But just the simple fact that the OCG has 3 is a prime example why we could possibly get this card back at some point in the future. So pick up your copies now if you haven't. Get a secret rare, ultra rare, super, or commons. They're still pretty expensive and they're banned. Maybe you want to make a little money. I recommend even picking up Maxx C in any sort of rarity. And when it comes back, I could see the card tripling in price pretty much for almost every rarity. But yeah, the simple fact that the OCG has 3 is kind of reason enough for us to have it at 3. It's not like it's a huge problem over there, not like it's being talked about being hit back down to 0 or something like that. They still have the card at 3, and I believe that would leave some sort of room on the table for us to get that card back to 3 at some point in the near future. Moving on, another point I have is the fact that it could potentially stall fast formats from being too crazy, especially when we get a card like Needle Fiber, which we know we will be getting at some point in the future. The 6 Samurai Link, tons of other Link plays, you know, with Summon Sorceress and all of these things. This card could potentially, if it comes back, could just you know, prevent these cards from being too overly powerful, because Maxx C again is there in the back of that deck's mind, so to speak, all these cards like Needle Fiber and Summon Source is sort of just a card that lingers in the background, that is an ever-present threat for them to have to deal with. Do I have the Called By? Do I have an Ash in hand for this play to be able to go through in case they have the Maxx C? Things of that nature. So I think that's sort of a similar talking point to the first thing I had mentioned earlier in the video. But not only could Maxx C slow down the current format, but it could slow down tons of future formats as well and allow for other cards to come back that are sort of special summon heavy and keep them in check. One card I can think of that as an example of that is Elder Entity Norden. Not that I think that card should come back at the moment. Maybe that's another card for another day in one of these types of videos. But again, that could just sort of lower the potency of these special summon heavy cards just simply by Maxx C being in the game. So it could be healthy to sort of put a limit, sort of put some of these spammy cards in check. Just because if you go for it and your opponent has the Maxx C, you don't have the counter to it, you're gonna pay for it a little bit by being sort of overly aggressive with your plays. And one of the last talking points I have here for a reason why Maxx C could come back is it would force people to play more conservative. Now, I said this earlier sort of in a different way, but overall with Maxx C being in the game, I think it changed the general mindset of each player in the competitive scene. Do I want to risk going for the full combo if I don't have the counters to it? Again, like Ash or Called by the Grave. Do I want to risk it? And, you know, if they do have a counter like Called by the Grave, they sort of have to think in their head, do they have one hand trap? Do they have two? Am I going to Call by a Maxx C, but then get ashed later on, and ultimately I still, you know, am in a worse off position? So overall, Maxx C coming back could lead to a more conservative play style, which would ultimately lead the game to a bit of a slowdown just simply because of the card's presence in the game. Now, of course, there's probably other reasons as to why this card could come back, and I just couldn't list them before I made this video, but those are some of the reasons that I have. Feel free, if you're pro Maxx C, let me know down in the comment section below what you think are some reasons why this card could come back, other than the reasons that I had just mentioned. So moving forward, we'll play Devil's Advocate again for somebody who would think it can come back, right? Some reasons why Maxx C possibly couldn't come back. Some of the reasons that I was able to think up. The first reason being we already have plenty of hand traps in the game, and it would allow more of a more hand trap heavy decks like Salamangreat, Sky Striker, any other deck that thrives off you know, main deck space to be able to play more hand traps. And I think Salamangreat is a great example, mainly because their ending fields usually consist of 1 to 2 interruptions via traps, and then they could have anywhere from 1 to 3 hand traps in their hand. Some of the more popular ones that they're playing right now are Ghost Ogre, Effect Veiler, and Ash Blossom. So imagine just replacing that Ghost Ogre with a Maxx C. That deck becomes increasingly more powerful. And obviously you could take into account the fact that they would have to play against Maxx C too, but just for the simple fact of talking about why it can't come back, we're just going to exclude that factor for the time being. But yeah, overall, Maxx C could just boost all of the already powerful decks even more. But again, like I said, it could boost the power of a lot of decks overall. Now, another reason I have for why it can't come back is the fact that it would put some decks in a lose or pass situation. You either do the full combo or you pass and end with a minimal board. Now, this was sort of the main reason why this card got hit down from 3 to 2 to 1 to 0 in the first place. It sort of put your opponent in an awkward, sort of unfair position. You know, they had the Maxx C. I didn't have an out for it. And, you know, I either try to make some sort of a field so I don't get completely blown out of the water, and I give them a few cards, which ultimately might spell your own demise, or you pass and don't give them anything at all and hope for the best, so to speak. Yeah, so it coming back could lead to a negative side effect of this sort of play style being a thing in the game again. But of course, as I mentioned beforehand, that we do have counters to this card now, unlike we did in the past. Because if you got Maxx C, there really wasn't a whole lot you could do about it other than having a monster negation handy on your field already, which was pretty unlikely. Another talking point I have here for why it couldn't come back is the fact that, do we need any more hand traps in the game at this particular moment? We have Infinite Impermanence. We have Ash Blossom, Effect Veiler, Droll and Lockbird, Ghost Ogre, DD Crow. The list goes on, and we're getting more in the future. Null Nun and Blooming Dogwood. Do we need another hand trap essentially in the game? We're already having to deal with being hand trapped 1 to 2 to 3 times in a turn, which is just, you know, obnoxious enough. Do we need to worry about another hand trap when we're already getting so many more? Or do some hand traps need to get hit for this card to come back? Do we need to make some room? I'll just throw out some examples. Does Ash Blossom need to go to 2? Or Droll and Lockbird? Or Infinite Impermanence or something need to get hit to sort of shrink the hand trap cooldown? I don't entirely think so, but I think one of the main reasons for why it couldn't come back is, like, do we just want to be in hand trap hell for much longer and for this, you know, pool of hand traps to grow larger? I personally don't. And yeah, do we want any more hand traps in the game? I don't know. I'm not too sure about that. So that's one more reason why it potentially couldn't come back to the TCG. And sort of the last point I'll bring up, it's not really a reason for why it couldn't come back. More so, it could come back until this happens. Does Maxx C need an errata before it can come back? I don't know what this errata could be, but some ideas are, could we put a draw limit on Maxx C? Maybe you can only draw up to so many cards with that effect per turn. Or could they errata it so that you only draw for each extra deck summon, since we are in linked format and extra decks summons and extra decks in general are becoming more and more prevalent? Could the card be errated to say for every time your opponent special summons from the extra deck or an extra deck monster, you draw a card instead of just a special summon, period? Let me know what you guys think about that down in the comment section below, because I've heard some other people talking about Maxx C possibly you know, getting an errata at some point in the future. Do you think it needs an errata? I personally am not a fan of them, but, you know, if it did get an errata, those are some potential ways it could be done. If you have any ideas for a possible errata for Maxx C, let me know down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear what you'd have to say. But, yeah, so those are some reasons I can give as to why it could or could not come back. Now, me personally, I think this card could come back. It's been gone for so many years now, and you know, despite there possibly being too many hand traps in the game, I can't deny the fact that we have more counters to this card than we have ever had in the past. And back in the day, you didn't really have an out to the Maxx C. You didn't have Call by the Grave. You didn't have Ash Blossom. You just sort of had to hope that you would pass on not giving them as many draws as possible. You would give them the minimal 1 to 2 draws and hope that there wasn't enough to help them, you know, push for a game or set up an unbreakable field on the next turn. But yeah, the main reason I can give for its coming back is we have Ash Blossom, we have Called by the Grave, and we have plenty of decks and archetypes in general right now that could just be put in check by Maxx C coming back. So I personally think it can. That to sort of answer the question that this video begs is, yes, I think it could come back. And what would happen if it were to come back is I simply think that it would become a staple in a lot of decks, much like we see Ash Blossom and Effect Veiler and Ghost Ogre and all of these things and Infinite Impermanence. I think it would become a staple. I think it might become format dependent possibly, because with certain decks coming in and out, some decks might not be you know, affected too much by Maxx C. Some decks that only special summon 1 to 2 times per turn in general. A deck like, I'll throw an example out there, Subterror. They don't really special summon that much during their own turns. You're setting 1 and passing the occasional maybe 1 to 2 special summons that they could probably negate with themselves anyways with the Fiendus card or Ash Blossom or Called by. Yeah, so with certain decks being able to, you know, be cycled in and out of the format, some decks aren't always going to be, you know, as affected by Maxx C as others, as opposed to a card like Ash Blossom, which can pretty much affect any deck in this game's existence because its overall broad spectrum of card coverage that it has and what it's able to negate and just simply say no from your opponent to doing. And the overall idea that Maxx C and Ash Blossom, while they're both staples, one is much more applicable to a lot of decks than the other. Ash Blossom can be applied to counter a lot of decks, whereas Maxx C, not so much. But I think, above all, the most important thing to take away from Maxx C, if it were to come back, is the fact that it would simply be an answer to the danger problem, the ever-present danger problem that we have. I think dangers will become more and more of a nuisance as time goes on, and Maxx C is a perfect answer other than just going right to the ban list with all these cards. So yeah, that's it for this video. That's another rendition of what would happen, Maxx C edition. Let me know what you guys think about it down in the comment section below. Did you enjoy the video? If so, let me know why. If not, let me know why, how we can make this video, this particular type of video, better. I'm always looking for ideas on how to improve this particular series. I'm trying to get it a bit more structured, and I think I'm getting to that point by now. But if you have any ideas, let me know down in the comment section below. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook and Twitter and Twitch. Join the Discord if you haven't, and also check out Imperium Duelist down in the description below for sleeves, dice, playmats, all of those things at a discount by using that code WinterKills10off. So thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, WinterKills signing out. We'll see you in the next one.